joining us. 1 in 8 U.S. women will develop invasive breast cancer over the course of their lifetime. In 2018, an estimated 266,000 new cases of invasive breast cancer are expected to be diagnosed in women in the United States. And surprisingly, about 2,500 new cases of invasive breast cancer are expected to be diagnosed in men in 2018. Today, Jill Canales, Volunteer Service Coordinator for Breastlink, Kelly Stasel, and Jackie Meyer will discuss their journey with breast cancer and their experiences with Breastlink. Well, welcome, ladies. I appreciate you being with
Thank
you.
you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So this is kind of a new format for us, and so we wanted to kind of have an interactive discussion about your journeys with breast cancer and some of the experiences that you had with Breastlink. So what I'd like to do is we'll start with you, Jill, because I know you're heading up the Breastlink Angels, and I know yourself, you went through breast cancer. So let's talk a little bit about how you were diagnosed and what were your experiences.
I was diagnosed in 2009. At the time, I really did not have breast cancer on my radar as things to be concerned about. I was 42 years old. I thought it was an older women's disease. Everybody that I knew that had breast cancer was, were in my mom's generation. So I had no family history, had really no reason to believe that it was something I needed to be worried about. But as fate would have it, I had an annual exam with my OBGYN. She felt something, was not overly concerned, but obviously I needed, it was time for my annual mammogram anyways, so that kind of started a very crazy next year. I was diagnosed within really a few days with a very aggressive triple negative breast cancer. At the time I had a 8-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 16-year-old, and it was very much of a kind of punch in the gut and a slap in the face, and it started a whirlwind of, scans and PET scans and CT scans, and to try and really pin down exactly what my diagnosis was and what the best treatment was for me.
Right.
So I started within 10 days with very aggressive chemotherapy.
Wow.
And had 6 months of chemotherapy and surgeries and radiation, and as I said, that was almost 9 years. In October, this October, that's 9 years ago. So it was a kind of mind-blowing time in my life, because I remember the very first time I met with Dr. West, I said to him, I know the risk factors for breast cancer. You see them in the magazines and you see them on flyers all the time, and I don't have one of them. And so what am I doing here? And his answer to me basically was, we don't know. Right. We don't know. And so other than being female, I had no risk factors for having a breast cancer, but there I sat.
Right.
So yeah, that was kind of how I started in this journey.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and start with you. Tell me a little bit about how you found out and what your experiences were.
Well, it was in 2001. I was 46 years old, and mine was my annual mammogram, and we didn't have a history of breast cancer in our family. So I went in for my annual mammogram, and the next day they called me and said, we'd like you to come back tomorrow afternoon about 4:30. So I did, and I walked in. And when they called my name, I went back to a room, and it was an ultrasound tech. And she said, I'll be doing an ultrasound of your left breast under your arm, axillary. So she's doing an ultrasound, and she said, do you know why you're here? And I said, well, I got a call back that there was something questionable. And then the radiologist came in, and she said, there are 3 different types of calcifications. One is completely benign, we're not worried about it. The second one, it needs follow-up because we're not sure. And the third type we know is malignant. And she said, we already know yours is malignant. And so she put all my slides up on the wall and turned on the lights, and it reminded me of, I call them my city lights, because when you're on an airplane and you look out at night and you see the city lights, I mean, slide after slide after slide. There were so many city lights. And so she scheduled me for biopsy the next day. And so I was diagnosed with invasive metastatic carcinoma. And it had, invasive ductal carcinoma. It had gone through 8 centimeters of breast tissue. I never had a lump. I never had a reason to worry about it. Our boys were 5, 6, and 7 at the time, and our 6-year-old son has special needs, so we just had a lot going on. And so I came home and told my husband. Anyway, back then they did surgery first and then chemo. Okay. So I got my surgical team together, and the whole time my breast oncology surgeon said, mastectomy, radiation, you'll be good to go. And the morning of my surgery, he said, you know, since it's gone through 8 centimeters of breast tissue, we're going to do a sentinel node biopsy, so I'd like you to sign this form. We're not looking for anything, we're just gonna rule it out. I said, okay. Well, halfway through the surgery, the surgeon went out to my husband and said, things have changed, you need to call your family. I don't think she's going to make it. She says, yeah, I had invasive metastatic carcinoma in my lymph nodes. And he said, we're gonna have to take it one day at a time. So, wow, that threw us into a real whirlwind. I felt blindsided, first of all, from my mammogram, finding out I had breast cancer, and then to find out that my prognosis was very poor. That threw us into another turmoil. So, and that was the beginning of my journey. That's how I started.
Okay, and how about you, Kelly? Let's
talk about your situation. My journey actually started 14 years ago. I was 36 at the time when I was diagnosed the first time with breast cancer. So I've traveled this journey twice, unfortunately. The first time that I was diagnosed at age 36, I didn't know anybody with breast cancer. It was found on imaging. My husband and I had just gotten married. We were talking about having a family, and I went in for my annual wellness check. They did a mammogram. They found a spot, and they wanted to do further testing. So I agreed, of course. You know, I didn't want to go home and have to worry about it. So I went through with the scans, biopsies. The mammographer at the time said, I wouldn't worry too much about this. I don't think it's anything like cancer. We think it's probably just calcifications, and you're going to be fine. Well, lo and behold, I got the call, and I was told it was cancer. So I, at that time, elected to do a lumpectomy with radiation. It was a very small cancer, so it didn't require chemo, so I felt pretty blessed and lucky. And this all started at Breastlink. So I've been a patient at Breastlink for 14 years. Okay. So kind of picked up the pieces and tried to find my new normal and go on with my life and enjoy being married and talk about maybe having a family. And 10 years later, I went in for I'd actually gotten mammograms every year, but here we are, fast forward 10 years later in 2014, and I went in for my annual mammogram, and they found something. So unfortunately, it was a new breast cancer. It was in the same breast. And things were going to be a little different this time. I elected to do a double mastectomy, and I also had to go through 4 rounds of chemo. So it's sort of, you know, no one's ever prepared to hear those words, not even the first time. And at this, you know, even the second time, you're shaken. I mean, you're just, you know, you just can't believe that you know, you're hearing those words. So, so I've gone through it twice, and I think for me personally, getting involved with the volunteer program was important. That I was able to give something back and help other women, having gone through it.
Okay. All right. One thing I'm noticing among all of you is that they're taking care of it pretty quickly upon you being diagnosed. So, yes. I mean, you all said it was within days that they actually called and told you, and then immediately you did something. So that is quite reassuring. At least they're on top of it. So, I mean, would you agree that that's what's happening?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I think all of us at this table, right, feel so grateful and indebted to the providers who took care of us. Right. I think that what's so unique about Breastlink is many things, but initially, you know, there is no waiting a week for a biopsy and then waiting another week for an MRI and then waiting, you know, where I know people all throughout the country. I get calls every week from friends of friends or relatives, or you know, somebody knows somebody that I know, and they've just been diagnosed with breast cancer. And unfortunately, that's not true everywhere.
Right.
One of the wonderful things about breast cancer is because they all work together. They work under one roof. You know, they share essentially office space, and they're walking back and forth to each other's offices all day. You know, there isn't that wait time, and I know that for me personally, you know, I got my biopsy results on Friday morning, and on Friday afternoon I saw Dr. West.
Wow.
And Monday morning I saw Dr. Link, and it was that quick.
Right.
And I know you guys can probably attest to this. You know, the treatment and the there's so many struggles when you go through breast cancer, but I think emotionally and mentally, the waiting is torture. Right. When you're waiting to figure out, is this cancer? Okay, it is cancer. Waiting to find out, well, what type of cancer? Because as we know, breast cancer is not one disease, it's many diseases, and the treatments are varied. Right. So that's, you know, I have to say, I will forever be grateful for that things moved very quickly, and I started treatment immediately.
Right, right. Would you also, I would
yeah, absolutely. I mean, Breastlink is a full, comprehensive, one-stop shop, as Jill mentioned, where you can go in and see your doctors, and you get your imaging done, and if you have to have radiation, you see the radiologist, oncology. It's like under one roof, which I'm not aware of any other facilities that offer that. It's a team approach to medicine, which I think we all appreciate, and you know, they call it doctors in concert, because they all sit around a table, and with a lot of these complicated cases, they discuss it amongst themselves, and they come up with a treatment plan for that woman based on, you know, everyone's opinion and everyone weighing in on it. Right. So I think that's important, because the last thing you want to do when you're diagnosed with breast cancer is go to all these different facilities, go here for treatment, here for imaging, here for oncology. It's all under one roof.
Right, that's good. That's good. I mean, I obviously everybody's talking and on the same page. For your situation, a little bit different. So you're in the operating room, and they had to go out to your husband at that time. How did your husband handle that information, and what kind of emotional toll was that on your family?
Well, thank goodness my best friend was with my husband, because when the doctor came out and told him, he literally fell apart. He fell apart. And then he started making the phone calls. And that was very hard for him to go through it over and over and over again with all of our family and not knowing. And he told me, he said, the first thing that ran through my mind, how am I going to raise my kids without my wife? What am I going to do? Because having a son with special needs also in the mix took a lot of time. I mean, but that's our family. So you do for your family. So my husband was scared. He was scared. He felt like it was hopeless. What am I going to do? And so that's how we started. And then my surgeon came in to me after I went back to my room after recovery, and I'll never forget, he's leaning over the side and he said, you know, I don't know what to say to you. It's one day at a time. We just don't know. And I had already met Dr. Link. So when I went in for my first appointment with Dr. Link, my husband was such a wreck. My twin sister went in with me. And so she sat with me, kind of like what we do with our new positives that we have. Anyway, she was my extra set of eyes and ears. And Dr. Link, he reassured me from the beginning. He said, this is not hopeless. He said, I have 3 plans I'd like to share with you. And each plan gives you a percentage of chance of survival. And so obviously I took the 90% plan, and that was 2 of the most aggressive forms of chemo, and followed by tamoxifen. And now they've come up with new drugs since then that I did after the tamoxifen. He said, you have a 90% chance of survival. Well, that was good for me. I mean, I said, there's really no question. But so I had to wait until after I'd healed from having my mastectomy to start chemo. So, so I did, and I mean, Dr. Link, oh my gosh, he's my hero. He is such an incredible, the team was so incredible. They all work together. It's not like one doctor working by themselves forming an opinion. The roundtable discussions that they have over patients, they all share their opinions, and together they work. That's the importance of having a place like Breastlink, because they all work together.
Exactly. And
it's an incredible place. It really is. From the moment you walk in, the staff is very professional. They're very caring. It's a very restful environment, peaceful environment when you walk in. So, and I really appreciate that, going into a place like that.
Well, last time you and I were discussing this, you did mention something about the facility and how it is calming and somewhat spa-like, I guess, if you will, where I know you're not having the same types of treatments, but nonetheless, at least it's making you feel comfortable, so you're not having anxiety. One thing I wanted to ask you before we talked about some other things about Breastlink is, from an emotional perspective for your family, I mean, with yours, we heard about your husband. How are your children? How do you explain it to your children?
Well, I had, at the time, 13 and 16-year-old girls and an 8-year-old son. And my girls kind of put on, you know, their rallying pants, and, you know, they were all about getting everybody to wear pink ribbons, and, you know, they kind of did this rally. And when I went shopping for a wig, they wanted to go with me, and we tried on Dolly Parton wigs, and we tried on Elvira wigs, and, you know, they really they were there to kind of boost me up. And when my hair started falling out, I went to a friend's house to have my head shaved, because I wasn't going to watch it all fall out, you know, chunk by chunk. And my girls wanted to go, and so my friend shaved my head, and they're like, oh my gosh, Mom, you don't even need a wig. You look so great, bald. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, right. But, you know, that's kind of the role that they played. My son was very different. He, you know, I had gotten a book that I read to him about, you know, losing your hair, and I felt that my husband and I had done a really good job to kind of preparing him for what this was going to look like. And I remember very clearly laying in my bed and reading this book to him and saying to him, I want you to understand that Mommy's going to lose her hair. Not because I'm so sick that I don't have hair, but, you know, when you take medicine, sometimes medicine does funny things to you. And that's what this medicine does. It makes your hair fall out. It's crazy, but that's what this medicine does. I thought he was prepared. And so, you know, little time went by, and I almost always had something on my head. During that time period, I think in general, women covered their heads more than they do now.
Right.
But when I was at home, often I would just have nothing on.
Right.
And I will never forget him coming home from the first time from school, and he walked in the house, and I was bald, and he covered his eyes. And he wouldn't look at me. And he said I needed to put something on my head, so I did. And that was, you know, gut-wrenching, because he could not look at me. And so I always knew if he was going to be home that I needed to have something on my head. And he would, you know, down the hall, there was a hall, and then our bedroom was kind of off to the side, and he would always say, I'm coming, Mom, you know, giving me the, you know, make sure everything's covered. And I was bald for quite a long time, and so by the end he got more used to it, but I would say it was outwardly the most difficult on him, although I will never know what it did to my girls. I will never know what it did to my husband. I don't know, you know, how painful it was. I know it was. But my son was just very outward about it. Every time he had a project at school, he was in 2nd grade at the time, And all the way through his 8th grade year, every time he would write a story or there would be anything where he would draw a picture, he would always put a pink ribbon at the top of it.
Aw.
Regardless if it had to do with me or our family. And I thought to myself, that had an impact on his life.
It did. It did.
So.
And going forward too. How about you guys? What about with your children?
Wow. Well, I was told after the first day of my infusion I should shave my head because of the 2 forms of chemo. I was told I would lose my hair all at once.
Okay.
So, and I'd cut my hair in 3 stages to make it easier on my boys because my hair was down to my waist. And so there I came home after my first infusion, and my husband shaved my head too. So I'll never forget, I was sitting out back and the boys were inside. My niece had come. She just turned 16. God love her. She spent 3 months.
I'm sorry. Something happened with the microphone?
Yeah. We can figure out which one. Hold on, just wait.
Okay. Sorry. We'll
That's
have to
okay.
pick it up a little.
That's
Pick it
okay.
up from my husband shaved my head.
Okay. So my husband shaved my head out back, and my boys were inside. And so when it was all done and over, he looked at me and he said, you know, you really look beautiful. I felt naked. I had all these emotions flying around. I had not looked at myself yet. So we let our 7-year-old come out first. And you know, you give them as much information as you think they can handle. And I too, we bought a book for Austin. And my son took one look at me and he said, Mommy, I hate you. I wish you were dead. Oh. But in my mind, you have to look for the positives. In my mind, I thought, he's dealing with it. He's actually dealing with it. So he went in the house. And then our son with special needs, he's nonverbal. So he looked at me and he rubbed my head, and then he rubbed his head, and he rubbed my head again, and he smiled and gave me a hug, and then he went inside. And then our 5-year-old, he came out. He took his hands and cupped them around my face, and he said, Mommy, you are beautiful. I love you. And he gave me a kiss, and then he went inside. And then it was my turn to go in, so I actually went through the sliding glass door into our bedroom to go into the bathroom. And I looked at myself, and you think you're going to be okay. You think, I can do this. But when you first see yourself, it's a real shock. And you feel naked. But I thought, well, I don't have any scars on my head. I got the mirror out, looked at the back of my head, and I thought,
You want to see what it looks like.
you know, well, you want to know because this is your new reality. And this is what you have to deal with. So you need to deal with it. And so that's how mine began.
Okay, all right.
So.
And how about you?
So unfortunately, we weren't able to have children because of my first diagnosis at 36. Different plan, you know, and you know, as far as I just wanted to say too that, you know, the families go through, much like, you know, we're talking about the children, along with our parents and our husbands, our spouses, go through breast cancer with us.
Right,
Yes.
And we often refer to them as co-survivors.
Okay.
So it's hard to know, it's hard to see them suffer through it,
Right.
because a lot of times you're just trying to survive yourself, right? And but you see that they're in pain, and you know, like with my mom had to move in with me to help my husband take care of me.
Okay.
And it was almost harder to see my mom and my husband suffer more than I was suffering.
Right.
Because you know, there's just days like you were talking about when you're going through chemo, and you know, you look in the mirror. I mean, you realize breast cancer strips you of everything,
Right.
all of your femininity. So that's hard, you know.
Yeah.
And my husband shaved my head, and that was one of the most painful things for me to go through, because I had to see the look on his face
Right.
as he, you know, had to
Right.
do that.
Right.
And there's nothing that we can do to fix it.
Exactly.
So, you know, it's a roller coaster of emotions.
Right.
And, you know, to see, as my mom would say, to see her daughter suffering so much and not be able to fix it. And I think as a mom, the two of you can relate to this.
Yeah.
You never want to see your child suffering. So
Exactly.
it's an emotional roller coaster. And
Right. Right. Well, you're all here today
Yes,
to tell
we
your
are.
story. And I know you've had support from your family and your friends, but not just support from family and friends, but you also have the Breastlink Angels that you all have become a part of.
Yes.
Yes.
So let's touch quickly about that. Maybe just give us a quick overview and then we'll talk about how they were involved.
Okay. The Breastlink Angels are women who have been through breast cancer. We have women in their 30s, we have women in their 80s. As I said, breast cancer is not one disease, it's many, many, many diseases. And as time goes on, we learn more about the differences in diagnosis. But they're women essentially who have been through the trauma of breast cancer and want to make a positive come from it. And we have about 52 women right now who volunteer. Some come into the office and will meet with newly diagnosed women. They'll sit with women in the infusion room. They'll sit sometimes with a woman who is terrified of having a mammogram and just needs someone to clutch onto. And then we also have women who, you know, lots of women work full time or have small children at home, and so they will, they get matched up with a patient who has maybe a similar diagnosis, similar age, similar life situation, and then they kind of become supportive over the phone. Sometimes they'll meet up. You know, there's lots of variations in how that relationship happens. But you know, I say this all the time, and I don't say this to be kind of shocking, but what these women give is really quite amazing, because if you think about, the best way I can describe it is if you were in a plane crash and you survived the plane crash, but you saw other women around you who did not. What these women do who volunteer is every time there's a plane crash, they go to that site and they help the people who are on that plane. And so we are there to help these women because we understand what they're going through. We're there to support them in whatever their needs are, and there are many different needs. But it also takes a very special woman, I believe, who can kind of relive their own trauma every time they meet a new patient. So I am amazed, really, at what these women are willing to do out of the goodness and the kindness of their heart. So,
and we have two
and
of
we
them
have
right
two
here.
right here.
So maybe each of you could take a quick second to just give me an idea of how you became involved with Breastlink Angels.
So I got involved obviously because of being a survivor myself. I started doing some stuff on my own just through word of mouth with friends of friends that were going through it. And I found how powerful my story could be to help someone. So I reached out to Breastlink and I was put in contact with Jill, and Jill called me, and you know, I became a volunteer. I mean, our motto is we rise by lifting others, and that is so true, because you can literally take your own hardship of a journey and make someone else's life a little bit more you know, easier to deal with, and you can share, you know, what you've been through. So I think it's really powerful what we do. I mean,
and yours is the same type of situation.
Mine is pretty much the same, because once you've had breast cancer, you're going through your journey, and it's a never-ending journey. You know, my friends I'd get a call from a friend or my sister, hey, so-and-so has just been diagnosed, can you help? Sure, give them my phone number. And so I would reach out to them. And being a patient at Breastlink, once I heard about the volunteer program, I went into Jill's office and said, I'd love to volunteer. I'd love to, it's time to give back and help other women. I didn't have that when I went through, when I began my journey. And it's a vital part. You want to be able to talk to a survivor and know that you're not alone. And also at Breastlink, I work in the office, and we provide a very safe place for women We'll have women come in that are just not having a good day or struggling.
Right.
And our office is a safe place for them to come. They don't have to be strong in our office. They can cry if they need to, and we can help encourage them with their struggles, but we provide a very safe environment for them.
Perfect.
So,
Well, ladies, I want to thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. It's very inspirational, and good journeys to you all.
Thank you.
And thank you again. All right.
Thank you.
For more information, please visit Breastlink Angels on Facebook and then on their Instagram page @Breastlink Angels. Thank you for joining us.